You're listening to the Raw Honeys Podcast, the place to be real, be love, and befriend. Join Chelsea Fine, Heather Hildenbrand, and me, Amanda Axel. We're real friends who aren't afraid to talk about the raw truth of real life. If you're looking for a group of girlfriends who will support and encourage you when the going gets tough, this is the place to be. Pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, and enjoy the show. Hey honeys, Heather here, and I am so excited to tell you it's just me. Amanda and Chelsea are not joining us today. They are elsewhere, and I'm doing a solo episode, so I'm excited. And also, it's a little weird. I don't know. It's like talking to myself after having so many people to talk to every week. But I know you're listening, and I'm excited you're here. We're doing sort of like a little experiment, I think. The three of us were talking about this a couple of weeks ago about how interesting it would be if we picked a topic and we all three did a separate episode on the same topic, because it would be really interesting to see, even though we all had the same topic, what all of our different answers were, because, you know, I think we would all say different things and it would just be really cool to see. So today we're talking about befriending ourselves. And I'm really excited. I can't wait to hear what Chelsea and Amanda will have to say about this. But I personally was really down to talk about this topic with you, because this is something that I don't want to say struggled with, although at times that is definitely what it was, but I have gotten really good with throughout some experiences I've had and throughout my life. And I'm really excited to talk to you about it because I think it's really important. It's like life-changing important. And so, because I mean, we talk about this, you know, we started a podcast about friendship because we all agree and are passionate about the importance of human connection, female connection, friendship, and how it can change our lives when we actually really support each other. But none of that is possible unless we support ourselves first. And so I really, really want to dig in this with you today. And we're going to go to some deep, dark places because that has been my experience. If you've listened to our podcast at all up until this point, then you probably know a few bits about some of the things that I'm going to talk about. But we're going in, guys. So, you know, just strap on your seatbelt because we're going. Okay, so the biggest, baddest, most terrible, hardest thing I have done is to get good with myself. That is definitely the hardest of the hard things that I've been through in my life. And so when I sat down to make this list, I wrote down the first thing and then I was like, well, I'm done. I mean, really, one and done, right? Like this first thing on my list was so big and so powerful in my own life. But I realized if we're going to have a top 5 list, I actually need to put 5 things on it, right? So I did, and we do have 5, and they are all super important. And I can't wait to go through them with you. And so here we go, okay? Okay, so reasons to befriend ourselves. And what does that even mean? So I'm going to take you through my list, and hopefully by the end, you understand what we mean by this if you don't already. Because if you're anything like I was even 10 years ago, I never stopped to think what this would mean to befriend myself or to know myself. So the first thing on my list, the first of my top 5 is your identity, knowing who you are. Because, you know, if you don't stop and think about that, I do think that your culture or your environment sort of dictates it to you. And you can either be reactionary about who you are, or you can be proactionary about who you are. And I was always reactionary. And I didn't even know it because I just never stopped to think about this. I never stopped to think about this whole topic, or especially this number one thing on the list. And so there were expectations, whether they were said or not growing up. There was an expectation that you grow up and you get married and you have babies. And I did that, except not in that order, because I just didn't even know it then, but I've always been a rebel. And that did not sit well with my family, you know? And so that was rough. And one of the things that came out of that time for me, when I was going through this rough time, I was a single mom. You know, I had a baby, I didn't have a husband, and it was obviously, it was close to what they had expected for me, but not quite right. And not really many people were happy, right? And so I started thinking about it and I realized, you know, I had never actually sat down and asked myself, do I want kids? And listen, I love my babies. I would not trade them for anything. Please hear me when I say that. I don't regret it. Okay. But I had never actually asked myself that. And I didn't realize that until after I started having kids. Like, that's probably also the wrong order, right? But we're not taught to actually like know ourselves, right? And to an extent, maybe we can't really know ourselves, you know, before a certain age. But I mean, I just never really thought, oh, I should like sit down and figure this out. You know, it was all just going along, going with the flow. And when I realized that, it made me really, I guess, question, you know, a lot of the choices that I was making up until that point, and some questions that I kept, or some choices that I kept making even after that. You know, it just started to really be eye-opening, kind of slowly over the next few years. And then something insane happened in my life. It was sort of the equivalent of a bomb being dropped over the surface of my entire life. You know, I had always had a rough relationship with my dad specifically, but with my parents. But it was always just, you know, we don't see eye to eye and things like that. And then about 10 years ago, it came out that my father was convicted of sexually abusing a couple of the young girls in our family. And it wasn't myself, but it was young girls, and it was blindsiding. You know, I had no idea that this had been going on until I found out it had been going on. It was like a truck had hit me. It devastated our family. It devastated my whole life. My whole life fell apart. I can't really even like put it into words beyond that. And it was shock, and it was betrayal, and it was grief, and it was disgust over this thing that had been going on. And so obviously there was a lot of like anger, and then, you know, healing later that would have to happen with everyone, right? And I thought initially that was the work, right? Like coming out of that time, I thought that was the work, was the healing from the anger and the grief and the betrayal, not just with myself, but helping others in my family to heal as well. And that was not even the work, you guys. The work was, I had an identity crisis. Like I didn't even know existed as a thing for people. I fell apart. I didn't know who he was anymore, so I didn't know who I was anymore. And so, I mean, like down to, I didn't even know if I could trust what was my favorite color. I just questioned everything. I lost a sense of everything about myself. And it was the hardest part of the work coming back from that. It was dark and it was deep, and it was long and it was hard. And it was long and hard, I think, too, because I didn't see it coming, that would be part of the real work that had to be done to get out of that. And so I just didn't even know how to navigate it. And I mean, I was in therapy, and this is one of the reasons I'm such a big proponent for therapy, because that saved me for sure. That alone saved me. Okay, that is why I'm still here. But it's still just like, wow, like that was what, you know, hit you or whatever came out of that, you know, that was what needed to be addressed. And I mean, I got to the point where I would take my journal out every single day and write down that day, what was my favorite color? What was my favorite food? What was my favorite music? What was my favorite thing to do with my free time, my favorite books, all of that, because I didn't know, or I didn't trust that I knew anymore. I had to question everything. And the beautiful thing that came out of that time, honestly, the beautiful thing was I came out of it knowing who I was. and what I wanted and what I stood for. And the really beautiful benefit of all of that is it made me stronger in my knowing. And then it helped me make better life choices for myself. And so coming forward from all of that, I have definitely rocked the boat a lot more with my family because my choices for me are not what the expectation was from them. But I'm happier with who I am and I'm more at peace with who I am. And I have that sense of real knowing of what I believe and who I want to be in the world. And it's just made such a huge difference. And so identity, knowing who you are, getting to know yourself is number one. And to me, it's number one because it's not something that we would normally consciously think about. I think that we take a lot of these things for granted about what we know about ourselves. And we don't really consciously explore a whole lot. And so I encourage you to do that if you haven't. And maybe you have to get a journal out and start from the baseline like I did, or maybe you're just wrestling with some hard thing. And for me, going back to the basics, like the simple things and building up from there was just much more helpful. So that's number one. It's always going to be number one. It was one of the most defining experiences of my life. And it wasn't just that what happened was defining, it was the process of coming through it that was defining for me in a really, kind of beautiful way as far as the work that ended up happening. So we just went real deep, but that's my number one. Number two, reasons to befriend yourself is that it combats loneliness. So in an earlier episode, a couple weeks ago, we talked about this loneliness epidemic that is affecting so many people, right? Like not just women, obviously men too. So many people are alone or worried about feeling alone. Like either they have at one point in their lives or they do ongoing. And let me ask you a question. Does the idea of eating dinner in a public restaurant by yourself like freak you out? Because that is a real barometer, I think, for this one. Because if you cannot stand the idea of being alone in public, like if you're like, oh, I've been wanting to see this movie, but I can't because I don't have anybody to go with, what are you even doing? Right? Like, obviously, there's work to be done if you can't feel content and have a good time by yourself. Something my parents say to me all the time, used to say all the time, that stuck with me is, you are the only person that you are going to be with for the rest of your life. And it's so true, right? And so if we can't get good with ourselves, I mean, like this is what it's about. This is something we really have to do, I think, in order to lead a like sort of peaceful, content life, right? In those moments when people are not around for us, because it will happen. So combating loneliness starts with befriending ourselves. Number 3, bravery, courage. And this kind of goes with what I was just saying, but I'm going to up the ante a little bit here. So you've already pictured how you would feel if you had to eat dinner in a public place, public restaurant alone. Now I want you to picture how you would feel if you knew you had to be in a foreign country or travel on a vacation to an unfamiliar place by yourself, and how that would feel and what kind of time do you think you would have? Listen, okay, so here's what I mean. When I was dating my husband, he was stationed here in Virginia in the Navy, and he told me from the beginning, I don't ever want to get married. I don't ever want to settle down with one person, and I'm not staying here. When I get orders, when my time is up here, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go far away, and this is it. That'll be it. And I was like, okay, that's, so this is just for now. This was like a short term, I called it like a terminal relationship. It had an expiration date, right? And we just were having fun. This was for right now. And that was our attitude for both of us. And then he got orders. He got orders to Guam. And if you've never heard of Guam, I understand. But let me just tell you, it is a tiny little island in the middle of nowhere, roughly off the coast of Japan. And it is about as far away as he could go without getting all the way back around here, right? And so he got orders to Guam and he left and we broke up. And that was that. That was supposed to be that, except that, I was miserable. And so I was like really hoping that he was miserable too. Right. And I got lucky. It was fantastic. I was like, this is all going according to plan. He called me miserable and I was so happy. Anyway, he did though. He called me one night and was like, I was sleepwalking last night and I thought I was at your house. And when I woke up and realized that I wasn't, I was sad. And it was weird because he doesn't sleepwalk. He's never done that ever since then, but he did. And so I was like, cool, this is great. It's going to work out then. And so we got back together. And so in order to make it work, I basically commuted back and forth to Guam for a few years because I had kids. I had middle schoolers. And I was like, we're not uprooting you. I mean, this, like he was just my boyfriend. So I didn't know. And so I would do like 3 months in Guam and 3 months here and back and forth. And so I just kind of commuted back and forth. Let me tell you, I racked up some sky miles. I was like the frequent flyer queen. But anyway, I went back and forth. And so my first trip to Guam, my first trip there, I had been there for like 2 weeks. It's beautiful. It's like this beautiful, like Hawaii, but like wild, right? Not so manicured. It's just jungle. It's just jungle and crazy and beautiful, but it's a jungle. And so anyway, I don't know anybody there and we're having a great time, just him and I. He's got this house he's rented up in the boonies. It's beautiful, but it's like out there. And so after about 2 weeks, he got orders for a job that he had to go to. When you're in the Navy, you have to go. You don't get a choice. And he was sent to this other island. This whole island is a Navy base. So it's just Navy, like no civilians allowed. That's where he got sent. Like the one place in the world I couldn't go with him, right? Like not even if I wanted to. And so he got sent there for 3 weeks. I was only there for 6 total the first time. And I'd already been there for 2. And then he got sent away for 3 weeks. I was by myself. I mean, I'm there. You don't change a plane ticket to go, across the world, right? I'm there. So it was like, see you when you get back. I'll be here. So I'm there by myself in a strange, like basically a foreign country. I mean, it's a U.S. territory, but and jungle on 3 sides of this house. And the 4th side was like, I swear, haunted, right? It was a terrible house experience. And so needless to say, I did not sleep for 3 weeks, but I also had to get good at being by myself in a scary, unfamiliar place. I had no choice. And I'm really glad now, I can say that now, that I had to do that because it built so much courage for me that now I know that I can do these things if I have to, right? And so learning or building a sense of bravery or courage so that you are okay doing unfamiliar things by yourself is so empowering. And then it's empowering in other areas of our life, right? So that was a lesson for me. And it's great because now I carry that with me. And now I know like, okay, I can do this hard thing. I can be in this unfamiliar place. I can navigate this thing and I can figure it out and it's going to be fine. Number 4 is be kinder to yourself. Go easy on yourself. This is a reason to befriend yourself, is that you will then be kinder to yourself. Be kinder to yourself is not like, hey, you should be kinder to yourself. It's like, as you get good at being alone, you also get good at being kinder to yourself. That's an order. That's an order, because what do we do when we get alone with ourselves? What do we do alone in our heads with ourselves all day, every day? We talk shit to ourselves, right? Like we talk really negatively to ourselves when nobody can hear us. It's crazy how negative we are to ourselves, and nobody can hear it. So like you get away with it, right? That voice, it gets away with it because no one else can hear it. And I'm sure if they could, you would be embarrassed, but because they can't, you let it say these things to you. And so in order to break this negative self-talk habit because, unchecked, like I'm terrible as well. It just happens to all of us. And so it's something that I've really been proactively working on because it's that important, because this voice affects everything. It affects our approach, our attitude, our sense of confidence, our bravery, our courage, our identity, everything I've already talked about. This voice can like beat it down, right? So we need her to check herself. Okay. Something I ask myself all the time now when this voice tries to get going is, would I say this to my best friend? The things that I'm letting this voice say to me in my head, would I say this out loud to my best friend if she was hurting about this or she was struggling with this? Would I say that out loud? And if the answer is no, then you are not allowed to say it to yourself. And your new job is to drown her out by not whatever means necessary. Like, don't just go start day drinking, but there's work to be done, right? Because this is you mistreating yourself. Think of it like a friendship. Again, if you wouldn't treat a friend this way, I don't even treat my enemies that way. I just wouldn't spew that stuff. Then why are we letting it happen to us in our own heads? And so this is just a huge one that we need to work on clearing out in order to be a good friend to ourselves. When we can be a good friend to ourselves in this way, we can be a better friend to other people. We can take care of people better. Another thing too is, think of it like this: all the things that you're constantly doing for other people, are you doing any of them for yourself? And I don't just mean like, if you're cooking for your family, are you cooking for yourself? I mean, like when you look at your family and you're like, what can I do to make their lives easier today? And you're not asking yourself the same question or doing something about it, that's an out of balance relationship with yourself. So I encourage you to examine that. Number 5, last but certainly not least, and girls, this one feels so good to say out loud: you care less what other people think. Oh my goodness. Preach. Girls, I am so excited to get a year older every year for this reason. Okay. I have never been somebody who would go back to her 20s. I don't need to return to any of that train wreck ever. Nothing makes it worth it. I know sometimes women are like, yeah, but I'll just take the body of my 20. I don't want to go back there. Not for anything. I might accidentally come away with some more baggage, and I have worked way too hard to leave it in the past. I'm so excited to move forward, but it's actually even better than I anticipated, because every year, the older I get, the less I care what other people think. Oh my gosh, how freeing. I hope this is happening to some of you and you are just like fist pumping in the air right now. Like, yes, girl, preach, because it's amazing. It's the best feeling in the whole world to give less craps. You know what I'm saying? It really is. And so if for no other reason, it is sort of like organically happening as I get older, but I also feel like the work I have done with my identity, knowing who I am, being confident with eating alone, having courage and bravery to travel alone, being kinder to myself, all of these things have also contributed so that these days I care less and less what other people think of my choices. And oh my gosh, if I could never have another people-pleasing urge ever again, that would be amazing, right? That is the goal. And so that is on this list because that is important to me. It is important for me to feel comfortable in my own skin and in my own choices so that when the haters and the judgers come along, I am not moved. And then even more than that, when that voice gets going, claiming that people are going to say something about what I'm doing, I don't listen to her. I can shut her out. And it has been, it's just delicious, guys. There's just not another word for it. I really hope you guys are experiencing the same thing. Please let me know if you are, or if you're not, or if you're like 24 listening to this episode. Oh my God, I just want you to hold on because it's coming and it is worth it. That is what you have to look forward to. It's going to be so good. So these are my 5 things. I am excited to see what Amanda and Chelsea have to say to add to this. I want to know what's on their list of 5 things. So we'll find that out when their episodes air. And in the meantime, what's your thing? If you could add one thing to this list, or if you could tell your 24-year-old self or your 20-year-old self one thing about why she should spend more time on being herself or getting to know herself, what would it be? What's one thing you would add to this list? I'm curious. And when you figure it out, I hope you will look us up on Instagram at The Raw Honeys, or find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called The Raw Honeys. That is an awesome community for conversations like this. So I hope you're there. And if not, I hope you look us up there and share this with a friend. Share this with a girlfriend who needs to spend some more time with herself. And thank you for joining. I don't know. This was kind of exciting, kind of cool to do a solo episode. I'm really glad you were here for it. I'm glad it wasn't really solo because you're here. And we'll see you next time on The Raw Honeys. Later.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Raw Honeys podcast. If so, please share it with a friend or post a review. Heather, Chelsea, and I would love to connect with you. Check us out on Instagram at The Raw Honeys, or join our community of honeys on Facebook. Thanks for listening. We wish you nothing but big love.